Okay, so we're going to start to talk about graphite. I don't know if a lot of you know, I know when we talk about pencils, we always say, when we refer to the part that actually draws in a pencil, we always refer to it usually as the lead of the pencil. However, we haven't had lead in our pencils in a very long time. In fact, lead is very toxic to people, and somewhere along the line, they realized that and stopped using lead and switched to what we know now as graphite. And actually, graphite is so much better, not only because it's non-toxic to us, but it's also great because it allows us to use it in different densities. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. These are the pencils ranges that I use in my drawings. And I'm going to kind of talk about what all of these little labels mean, because I don't know if you've ever been to Hobby Lobby or another art store where you see there's pencils and they have all different, like one says 4B, 2H, HB. And I remember when I was in high school, I was like, I don't know what any of that means, and so I would just buy random pencils and not really understand what they're for. So I'm going to kind of talk to you about that today. Another thing too is, if you're ever looking for a good sharpener, this right here is the #1 best sharpener out there. You're able to change the blade every now and then, but the blade, it comes with a couple of blades and they're really sharp, they're really good, and they don't really break the pencil lead like some other ones do. And then I have my blending stump, which will help me we leave the finger blending to elementary school. Finger blending is actually really bad for trying to blend graphite. So definitely invest in one of these guys. And then my trusty Stabford eraser, which I love. It's great. It doesn't create a whole lot of dust, and it gets rid of really tough pencil lines. Okay, so I'm going to kind of show you what each of these pencils does, and then from there we'll talk about the proper ways to hold a pencil and things like that. So let's get started. Okay, so here is the range, and if you see a pencil, for example, like this one that says 2HB. Oh, whoops, I skipped one. So sorry. That actually should be right here. But if you see a pencil that has an H in it, that means it's referencing to hard, which means that the density of the graphite is a lot. It's very hard. The great thing about these pencils is they allow you to draw or shade very, very light values. So you can see here, I'm shading with my, no, I am doing it in the right one. No, I'm not. You can see here my 2H, it's very, very light, and it stays light no matter the pressure that you use, which is great. I want to tell you guys now that you need to create a good shading or value and create a smooth shade. Don't ever use pressure to make something darker. The only way to make something darker is to adjust the type of pencil that you use. So switch from anything with an H to something that has a letter B. B is going to be all of your softer graphites, and they're numbered so that they get softer the higher the number goes. So there's B, 2B, 4B, 6B, 8B, and ebony. And then on this direction, HB is like a perfect middle ground between the two. So there's HB, and then you've got 2HB, and those numbers go all the way up. I don't have them all. And then you go into like the really hard ones, which are just H. And this is in that scale 2H. So this is the hardest pencil, graphite pencil that I have. And what we typically use it for is for like initial sketches. So like if I'm trying to draw a face, right? Or somebody's head, I always start with pencils that have an H in it. So I really, really like my 2H pencil because it allows you to erase without feeling like, you know, you messed something up. And, you know, you're not drawing too heavy to where you won't be able to erase. So in your initial drawing, when you're kind of doing the contour line, and contour line means like the outline of something. So when you're doing that initial drawing, you want to always start with like a 2H or an H, because that's going to give you really light lines. Even if you are somebody that holds your pencil really heavy, you're heavy-handed, it's still going to give you a really light line, even if you're pressing really hard, okay? And when you erase it, it will erase completely, which is what you want, because you don't want to start putting in any heavy values until you know that your proportions and all your lines are correct. Because if you start with a darker or a softer graphite, you're not going to be able to erase, and you're going to end up having to get a different piece of paper. Okay, so that is 2H. Like I said, it's very, very light. It's good for initial drawings. And now we've got 2HB. And 2HB is a little interesting. It's what is closest to what you guys are probably used to using. And that is like a number 2 pencil. This is the closest to a number 2 pencil. So it's hard, meaning that it's hard, but it also has a soft quality to it. So it's going to give you it's a very good medium balance, very close to your HB. And let's look at the HB. So your HB, same thing. And guys, keep your pencils really sharp with this. This is so important. This one varies a lot. Like you can get really light tones, and you can also get fairly dark tones with it. It's great for just doing like contour line drawings where you need a little bit darker lines, but you still don't want it to be super soft and heavy. You just need like really nice clean lines that are a little bit darker than your 2H. So this HB is still a harder graphite, but it's a little bit darker than your 2H. So HB and then 2HB is, they're very similar. Okay, now let's look at B. So now we're getting into the softer range. Anything that is labeled with a B is going to be a soft graphite. And so we're just going to get slowly heavier as we go down our little grid. So you can see here, whenever you're trying to build up a value, the best thing to do is to hold your pencil out here and use the side of the pencil. So you don't need to use the tip. The tip of the pencil is not going to give you a smooth shade. And notice how instead of using pressure to shade with, I am using light layer after light layer. So I'm applying almost no pressure, which is really important. Pressure leads to really uneven tones when you're trying to blend with your blending stump. This is the best method because it's a smooth and even application. Whereas when you press hard, it pushes into the paper, it pushes the fibers of the paper down, and it does not make it look very good. So your goal with this is really to build up a dark value by doing layer after layer. And always use the side of the pencil, hold the pencil back here, kind of how I have it. And then each layer that you do, change the direction that you go in. So like, I think my first layer, I went like this, then go like this, then go like this. And that makes sure that you get all the white space. So that is your 2B, which is the lightest of the soft graphite. Now we're gonna go, or I'm sorry, that was the just letter B. This is your 2B. And these are my favorite pencils. They are woodless graphite, which means that there's no wood. It's just solid graphite, which is amazing for shading. Because the wood is not going to get in the way of your shading or leave any unnecessary bumps. Okay, so the best thing about 2B, I use 2B a lot because you're still pretty close to the harder part of the graphite and feel like it's like just the right amount of softness to where when you're putting down those like mid-tone ranges and things like that in your pencil, it's gonna add in, it varies a lot. So you can kind of go back and forth between you know, doing some lighter values and darker values very easily with your 2B pencil. And I'm not creating the smoothest application. I'm kind of rushing, which is not good. But you want to go slower, and again, I cannot stress enough, you've got to have even pressure, or lack of pressure. Like I'm not pressing down at all. You just want your pencil to glide on the surface of your paper. And make sure that you don't press down too hard in some areas, because you can see here how this is a little bit uneven because I was pressing down a little bit harder in some areas and lighter in others. So it is really important that you keep the pressure the same and be really light-handed when you shade to create a nice even effect. Okay, moving on to our 4B. So 4B is even softer than our 2B. And when you're shading, you want to make sure that you're not trying to cover too much ground too quickly. So even if you've got a lot of area to cover, like this box is a little bigger than others, take your time and make sure that you're just slowly going across the paper and making sure that you fill in any gaps and you're not sitting here like this. When you try to cover too many areas, you're gonna leave white spaces in between, and that's gonna add to your uneven values. So it's not gonna be a consistent value. Some areas will be darker, some will be lighter. Then if you try and go back and fix it, you just continue to add to the problem. So it's very important that you stay consistent and you move slowly across the paper so that you don't run into that problem. But this is nice. It's good for blending, like the medium tones. These are all good for your medium tones, and these are good for your dark tones. I did have a woodless Prismacolor graphite for, I think, my 4B, or maybe I don't. Yes, I do. So I can give you kind of an idea of what that looks like. And actually, this isn't Prismacolor, it's Progresso. which I think is a Korean brand, but you can look up, I know Prismacolor likes to say that they are the best at everything. I will agree that they are the best at colored pencils, but as far as graphite pencils go, there are a lot of really amazing brands out there. So don't feel like you have to spend bucos of money on a Prismacolor graphite pencil when these other brands, like this one from Korea called Progresso, is just as good, if not slightly better. But notice how you get that nice, pretty, even shade. So these were both 4B, just two different brands. Okay, here is 6B. So, move that over just a little. Your 6B is even softer than the 4B. And again, you want to go slowly in your application, making sure to use the side of the pencil. You don't need to use, it doesn't need to be flat against the paper, but just slightly lifted. And that is a perfect angle for shading. I just kind of have it sit right here in the palm of my hand. And changing direction will help you get a darker value, but you can kind of see what that does. Okay, and then let's go on to, I think next is our 8B. So this is and I never pronounce this right, Derwent. It's a brand from England, and they're pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. I like it because it's almost like it has a buttery feel to it. So when you're applying it helps with, if you're somebody who has trouble keeping an even pressure, this brand is great because it's got that buttery effect. So it kind of helps you take more control over that pressure that you give. And then the darkest, this is the darkest on the graphite scale of graded graphite pencils, but there is one that is even darker than that, and it is called your ebony pencil. And a lot of different brands make this. This is the Prismacolor one, and then I'll show you, this is the one that we have in the classroom, which is the design. It's made by Stanford. They're basically the same thing. The only thing that I find annoying about the Stanford ones is that if you just ever so slightly drop it, all of the graphite in the center shatters, and then you are left with a pencil that is about this big. So that is my only downside to those. But I'm going to show you with the Prismacolor one, since this one is not broken and my other one is. And this is essentially as dark as you can get with shading. It's relatively, in my opinion, equal. It depends on the brand that you get. So like I said, this is Prismacolor. And you can see, to me, my 8B from that brand from England is, to me, a little bit darker than this. But the ebony, I think, gives a smoother value to it. So, or smoother application. So you can see here, this one, I mean, I'm sure that I could press harder with that or give a little bit more pressure, but to me, it's still that really buttery effect. So it's not gonna completely, it's got a texture to it. So this is a lot more smooth than this English brand of pencil. I do want to show you this, the Stanford one. I'm going to try and sharpen this, and then we'll see if I can give an example of that in just a second. Okay, I managed to sharpen it. So I'll show you the difference between the Prismacolor ebony, and then this one is the Stanford ebony pencil. I think that this one to me seems a little bit more stiff. It's not as much of a smooth application necessarily, but it still leads a pretty good result. It still gets really dark and allows for a good range of value. So in my opinion, I really like it. It's got, this is, I don't know, maybe this is just me, but it seems like it's got like almost a blue tint to it. Almost like it's not completely neutral. But that could just be me and my crazy eyeballs. I don't know. But anyway, those are the differences. That was the Prismacolor. This was the Stanford. And this was the English brand of 8B. So those are kind of a rundown of the different colored pencil, or not colored pencils, graphite pencils that you have. Now, when shading an object of some kind, let's try and talk about shading a sphere, right? So I've got a bouncy ball here that I'm gonna draw, and I'm gonna use my H, if I can find it. No. Really? One of these. Got too many pencils. Well, we'll use the HB since I don't know where my other one went. To initially draw, you want to use your H, 2H, HB to start with. And when shading an object, the most important thing is to identify the light source. So if you're trying to make this look realistic, you've got to identify where the light is going to be coming from, because the easiest way to make it not seem realistic is to not be consistent in where the light is coming from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I've got the sun or a flashlight here, and it is shining and hitting right there where that X is. That is going to be where my highlight is. So there's a lot of different kinds of tones when it comes to shading an object. So the spot where it is the brightest, or the highlight, where it's like basically the white of the paper, that's called your highlight. And then as you move further away from the light source, and that's where the midtones come in. So these are your midtones. Basically, it's like an ombre effect where it goes from white all the way to dark. And then back here, along the edge is going to be your shadow tones or your dark tones. And then this is something, it's kind of hard to understand at first, but light isn't just hitting here. It's going to be hitting on whatever surface your object is sitting on, right? So if there's light coming here, it's going to start to hit, you know, the floor as well, or whatever surface that your object is sitting on. So that light bounces off of different things. So that light is coming down here and it's bouncing off onto your object. So you're going to get, and it's ever so slightly like the sliver of a moon, what's called reflected light. And that's where I usually go in with my eraser and kind of pick up some of my shadow tones to show that like light that's being reflected into the shadow area. But the darkest part of shading an object is going to be the surface that is directly underneath the object. That is the darkest part. And that's the shadow, cast shadow. Okay. So those are your different kinds of light that's going on. And one thing that I do want to point out is if you've got something where the light is shining right on the edge of that surface, you want to avoid doing any type of outlines and instead have it be a change in value. So I right now did a line to indicate where the table is versus where the background is, right? But in a finished drawing, you want to make sure to show a change in value and not just a line if you want it to be more realistic. So you need to determine, is the background darker or is my tabletop darker? But considering that we have a light source that's shining on the table, I would say that most likely the darker area is going to be my, my background. So I always like to kind of get that in there first, and you shouldn't have to shade like the whole thing, but what I usually do is create some sort of a indication that this is going to be a darker value than the tabletop or my little ball or sphere, whatever you want to call it, right? Okay, so I like to always get that in first as kind of an indicator. It helps to judge the tones that you need for your object when you know what the background is going to be like. And I'm not shading very smooth. This is not a great example of it, but I'm kind of trying to go quickly so that this video is not a million minutes long. Okay, so from here, then I'm going to switch to probably either my 2B or my 4B. And I'm going to kind of erase everything that I wrote in here so that we can actually shade. But notice how now I have, instead of a line indicating the top of my ball or circle or a line indicating where the table ends, I now have a change in value. So the background's darker, this is lighter. That is the best way to go about creating lines. You want more, this is called an implied line. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna indicate that this is like my highlight area, which is basically the white of the paper. So around it, I'm gonna do like really light lines. And like I said, I'm using a 4B right now, and this might even still be a little much for what I'm doing. I might need to switch to a 2B or a B. Let's see what the B does. Yeah. All right, let's give this another go. I'm gonna try my 2H. And I'm just gonna slightly almost outline the tone around where my highlight is. So my highlight is this little circle here. And then I can go back and use my blending stump just ever so slightly. To kind of have it create that fade around that highlight area, right? Okay, and then from there, you're gonna get progressively darker as you go away from this. I keep grabbing the wrong ones. That's another thing too. I usually label my pencils with like colored tape to determine, you know, what they are, rather than trying to read the tiny funny little logos that they give you on these freaking pencils. Okay, I just switched to my 4B because I, for some reason, cannot find my 2B. But 4B is fine. So now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of giving a very even, or attempting a very even application of like my midtones. So my midtones are like in between, what's in between like my light highlight tones and my shadow tones. Okay, and once you get a good application of all of that, you haven't missed any spots, then you can really go in, and this is where it's more about preference. I usually like to stick with like a 6B or something like that to give more of a more control before I get to my my 8B or my ebony pencil. But some people like to go straight in with the really soft graphite, which is totally, I think, your decision only. And all of this that I'm doing can really be done with just one type of pencil. Like if you wanted to just get a 4B or just get a 2B, you could achieve all of that with just that pencil alone, rather than, you know, spending a bunch of money trying to get all of these different types of pencils. So don't feel like you have to go out and buy like a million packs of pencils like this. I think I got through all of my art classes in high school with just a 2B and a 4B. So it is totally doable and it will still look amazing. And then I'm not totally done, but I am going to kind of go in with my blending stump and very lightly, guys. I'm not putting hardly any pressure down. And kind of blend and grab some of those areas that I might have missed. Okay, now I'm gonna go in with my 8B, which is basically, you can use 8B or you can use an ebony. They pretty much do the same thing. Okay, and now I'm going in with my shadow tones, which are the darkest. Now that I've got my midtones done, my shadow tones are going to be the furthest away from my light source. And when you're trying to blend two different values, you know, start with like a little bit of pressure and then really lighten it up as you go towards your midtones. And that's going to give a very seamless effect between your shadow tone and your midtones. Okay, and then from here, the base is the bottom of your circle. That's going to be the darkest spot. So right down here is going to be the darkest part of my sphere. And then as you go out, shadows usually do not have a perfectly defined edge. So the best way to show that is to really create like I'm putting a medium amount of pressure And then lift up your pressure as you start to get towards the edge of that shadow. And that's gonna really make it seem like it's a real shadow. And not just a part of your, like another shape or object. Okay, and that is about it. So, that is what I usually do for using and blending with graphite. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Obviously, I will help you in class as well, but this is something that you can kind of look at on your own. But no more blending with the fingers. Always use the stump. And I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.